But I want to pinpoint many of the major blocks to our spiritual empowerment and our spiritual ability. You know, I always go back to the statement of Jesus in the Gospel of St. John when he said, all of the miracles, all the wonders that I did or do, you will do, and greater indeed than these will you do. And I'm wondering where this has taken place. It hasn't, obviously. So obviously something has gone radically wrong about our ability to not be a prey to disease, old age, and frailty, and so forth. And I want to analyze where that happened and what we can do to correct it. So that will be my focus in the conference at the Delta Hotel, Vancouver.
Wonderful. And so I'm curious, with your background in Catholicism, I also come from a Catholic background, and I sort of separated myself from the church.
I knew there was something special about you right away.
But I'm curious because there is talk in the Bible about us, all of us, having the same ability to tap into whatever that God essence is, that whatever, however you define it. Yet it seems, especially in the Catholic Church, that is somewhat hidden. It's like if you want to talk to God, you have to go through a priest. You have to do all of these ritualistic things in order to tap into the God energy. And I don't think that that's really teaching that we all have the power, the same abilities that Jesus had.
No, you're absolutely correct, Marie. But it's not, it's not confined to Christianity. I think you find the same syndrome everywhere. You know, it's in Buddhism, it's in Hinduism, it's in Islam very preeminently. It's in all the Christian versions of religion. In other words, you've got to go through whoever holds the franchise to God. Whether it's the Buddha or Krishna or Jesus or someone else, you've got to go through the established structure. And of course, this is fundamentally a flawed understanding, because we all are children of God. We all have direct access to the divine, and the religious organizations, if they were doing their job, they should be facilitating that, not insisting on an exclusive avenue through them, through the people who have the franchise.
And so, Miceal, I'm curious, with your background in Catholicism and working closely with the Pope, Catholicism teaches you that, God created the heaven and earth, or God created the earth in, 7 days, the universe? And in the movie...
Someone said one time, the last thing he created on the sixth day was man and woman, and there's no wonder that he needed a rest on the seventh.
And so I'm just curious what you speak in the movie What the Bleep Do We Know from a more scientific standpoint, yet you come from this highly religious background. And so what exactly does God mean to you?
Well, I think, I was a theologian. I was professor of theology at university level for, I think it was 16 years. I was a lecturer prior to that, etc. And, of course, I worked, as you kindly mentioned, on the Vatican Commission for 17 years. But looking at the evidence that's out there, what you see is that God, the book of Genesis says that God made man and woman, I assume, in his own image. His always, of course. There was always a masculine God in the traditions of the West, which, of course, is a major problem in itself, but leave that for now. So God made man in his own image. But I think, in fact, the truth rather has been that we have made God in our image. And that the kind of God that you and I and everyone else look up to, who was raised in, say, in a traditional religious Western background, is basically a human-style God. We have humanized God. We have turned God into an enlarged human being, by and large with the same virtues and the same frailties and weaknesses as we ourselves have. If you look at the pictures, say, of God in the Old Testament, you see basically a being who gets angry, who is fickle, capricious, annoyed, who is vengeful, etc. I mean, this has really nothing to do with the real God. I mean, this is a caricature of God. And, God can look after himself. If God is the creator of the universe, he's really not dependent, or he or she or it. These are all polarized categories that really have nothing to do with the real thing, because God is not part of this level of creation. So whether you call God him, or whether you call God she, or whether you call God it, is largely irrelevant, because you're still talking in terms of polarization, positive, minus, male and female, etc. And when we talk of God in this human-style way, we have to realize we're imposing categories on God that do not belong to God at all. Because what we have is a web of fables, that we are here for a life of moral testing. We're here to work out a redemption, which was laid out by Jesus from the consequences of our sin. We're here to investigate the need for repentance. We're here to be subject to the prospect of punishment or reward for all eternity after death, even though Jesus himself never spoke about those things. So all these fables grew up around, I'm afraid to say, an all too human figure of God. So God is not this. If I were asked, say in terms of your direct question, how would I envisage God? The first thing we have to do is to realize that God is not a human-style individual or being. God is the source of all that exists, and is 6 levels above us in the scheme of things, in the schemes of the dimensions of reality that exist, which we call the electromagnetic spectrum. And obviously God cannot be, an enlarged human being up there brooding about whether I am observing this or that commandment at any given time, or whether I'm doing this or that and the other. If I were asked to say it, I would say that God is much more like a verb, much more like an action than God is a noun, much more like an object. God is not an object. God is not a human being enlarged. God is a pervasive, personal, pulsating presence in all that exists. And when I look at what I called on another interview 3 or 4 days ago with another person, I said that we have a lot of people today who are atheists, or say they are atheists at least. People like Christopher Hitchens and so on. And, I really sympathize with what they're saying, and I really sympathize with the problems that they have put their finger on in conventional belief. But I think they've thrown out the baby with the bathwater, unfortunately, because in saying there is no God, I think they have at the same time thrown out the enormous personal power that every individual who walks this earth has within them. And that's what Jesus came to try to unveil. He tried to show us how to draw out from within us the extraordinary power that we have to create and manifest the kind of reality we would wish to experience, which fortunately in our own time, quantum physics, has given us an enormous tool to expand and explicate on. There is no reason why you or I or anyone on this earth should ever be prey to disease, old age, and frailty. I think of any parent whose child is suffering from an incurable disease or illness, or someone who's beloved of us is suffering from disease or illness. And we're all down here in the very bottom level of those 7 levels of creation, and we're trying to fix it mass to mass. We're trying to make money mass to mass. We're trying to solve the problems of the world mass to mass. And yet we know in the very structure of creation that there is an other way of doing all these things. That is what Jesus came to reveal to us. And that, I am sad to say, it has been the realization of that has been a catastrophic failure.
So,
because it never got the message.
So, Miceal, you'd mentioned atheists, and it's interesting. Nietzsche went as far to say as God is dead, that we killed God. Do you think that organized religion is a way of killing God?
Absolutely. I call Dawkins and Hitchens the boutique atheists, I called them on a program recently. And as I said, I do sympathize exactly with what they're saying. But the thing that we have to, I think, be careful about is that we don't do away with God simply because we are doing, like Dawkins and Hitchens, we're doing away with the conventional religious image of God, which does need to be done away with. But if you say there is no God, period, I think then you have thrown away your birthright. You've thrown away the greatest hope and the greatest avenue out of this mess we're all in that you could ever do. I mean, one thing I always liked, I was a student of philosophy in my first degree, but the one thing I always liked about Friedrich Nietzsche, especially in his famous work, Als sprach Zarathustra, was that he was not a boutique atheist. He was out there rampant, raging, and furious about the forms of religion and what they imposed on human beings. He was more concerned with the negative impact that all of this had on us than he was about God. And as I said, God is well able to take care of him or her or itself. God doesn't need our support and our encouragement and all that. So, I'm very sympathetic with all of this, but the boutique atheists today, I think, have fingered things that really we need to address because we're so powerless. I mean, we can't even heal the common cold. Now, that is not the way we were meant to be here. And if it is not the way we are, then I think we do need to do ourselves the favor of asking why.